Welcome to this e-learning module on Learning to Learn, brought to you by the Avenue Learning Centre. This is the first of 6 lessons that make up the course, and in this first lesson we're going to look at the question, why is learning to learn important? Well, let's begin by recognising that learning is a normal part of life. Learning is important in itself. It's how we develop and progress. Mostly we don't think much about it. We tend to take it for granted. But from birth our grey matter has hungrily sought out new knowledge and skills, and long may it do so. We tend to be pretty good at it in general, but could we actually improve our learning? Can we actually learn how to learn? Well, the short answer is yes, and we're going to look at that in more detail throughout this module. We're going to look at how we can optimize our learning, that is, how we can make sure that we do the best we possibly can when it comes to learning, developing and improving. The first point we're going to look at in Lesson 1 in terms of this question of why is learning to learn so important is the recognition that learning itself is important. So we're going to explore to begin with some reasons why we need to be aware of the importance of learning itself. And the first one of those is the recognition that learning brings growth and personal development. So it isn't just about learning in a technical sense, it's about how we can grow as people, how we can develop personally through processes of learning. And that will bring us more opportunities, or life chances to use the technical term. It opens doors for us, not just in terms of possible promotion, but also in terms of our lives more broadly. The better we understand life, the more we can get out of it. So the first point I want to emphasize then is learning itself is important because it brings growth and personal development. But of course, that's not the only reason learning is important. There's also what I like to call the adventure of learning. And what I mean by that is that learning can bring stimulation, growth and excitement. That there is something intrinsically satisfying about learning. So even in situations where the learning may not produce a concrete change, as I've already mentioned in terms of promotion, for example, the fact that we've learned is in itself a positive thing. It stimulates us, motivates us, can bring pleasure and enjoyment in itself. And for me, this is one of the most important aspects of learning to learn, is not having an attitude towards learning which is simply about what benefits you can get in terms of particular outcomes, but the process itself being an important one, that it brings with it its own benefits. And that's what I mean when I say that learning is intrinsically satisfying. There's something about the process itself. And of course, that's in addition to the benefits we get from learning more broadly. There's also improvement in performance to consider. Let's look, for example, at what Pedler et al. Have to say about this. They quote, "The standard approach to training and development has been that of learning to get the right answer from authority figures, teachers, experts, bosses, parents, in other words, to do things properly. In recent years, views have changed considerably. The emphasis has shifted from training to do things right, to learning to improve, to push out the frontiers of knowledge and performance, in other words, to do things better." For me, this is a really important passage because what it shows is that learning isn't simply about developing a particular knowledge base or learning certain technical skills. It's about an overall improvements in our performance. Whatever it is we are doing, whether it's work related or otherwise, it is something that we can do better through learning. So, as we've already seen, learning is intrinsically positive, but it can also bring about an improvement in performance. So when it comes to training courses, for example, we need to think about whether attending a particular training course will actually achieve an improvement in performance, whether levels or standards of practice will be better after the training course than they were before. This is a point that we'll return to later. But for now, what we should recognize is that an improvement in our performance can relate directly to work, but can also relate to our wider lives in terms of our hobbies, for example. If there's something that involves a level of skill that we do in our personal life, then learning can mean that we can do that better as well, and potentially then get more satisfaction from it. And indeed, that's an important aspect of recognizing the significance of improvement in performance, is that it can bring greater satisfaction and enjoyment. And of course, linked to that is there's therefore less chance we will get bored and lose interest. And that applies both within work and outside of work, of course. So, one of the reasons why learning to learn is important is that the more we learn, the better we will be at whatever we're trying to do, and the more satisfaction we will get from it. And so the better we are at learning, the greater the results will be from what we are doing. Then there's also the issue of increased confidence to consider. The more learning we've done, the stronger a position we are in to tackle the challenges we face in our work, and therefore the greater confidence we can have in doing so. And having that higher level of confidence can then make it easier for us to learn. And so what we can create then is what's known as a virtuous circle. Most people are familiar with the idea of a vicious circle, where things go from bad to worse and then continue to get worse and worse. But a virtuous circle is the opposite of that. It's where things go from strength to strength, where they get better and better. And an increased level of confidence can produce a virtuous circle. That is, it can increase our ability to do our job or to engage in our hobbies and so on. We're able to do that more effectively, so that we then feel better about it. We can then feel more confident when we are better at what we do, which then enables us to get better still. So a virtuous circle, as it's known, is developed. Now, I want to emphasize the importance of confidence because it can play a key part in learning. If we're not confident, then we can block our own learning. And so that's a point we'll return to later when we look at obstacles to learning. But for now, I just want to emphasize that confidence is a key factor. And learning to learn, that is optimizing learning, is something that benefits from confidence and contributes to better confidence. Now, there's also an increased sense of security to consider, and this applies in a number of ways. If we are able to learn effectively, then we are going to be better equipped to tackle the challenges we face. So we've got less to be afraid of in terms of things going wrong in our work if we are constantly learning, if we are constantly building up our knowledge, skills, confidence and so on in relation to our work. And linked to this is the idea that learning gives us more awareness of threats, dangers and pitfalls. Many people, for example, have found themselves in some difficulties because there were dangers that they were unaware of, which then created problems for them. If they'd been more aware of that danger or that pitfall, there would have been less likelihood of that situation going awry. An example of this would be in terms of responding to aggression. If we are skilled in dealing with such matters at an interpersonal level, for example, if we have the knowledge, skills and confidence to be able to defuse a tense situation where aggression is beginning to be displayed, then we're in a much stronger position to prevent that from overspilling into actual violence. Also, this brings us back to the subject of confidence, because if we are feeling more secure in what we're doing, we're likely to feel more confident. The more confident we feel, the more secure we will feel as well. So there's another virtuous circle there to be recognized in terms of the link between a sense of security and confidence. Now, of course, learning will not in itself necessarily produce a sense of security, but it can contribute to that. It can have an important role to play in helping us to feel safe and secure in whatever challenges we are facing. Now, last but not least, in terms of why we should see learning itself as important, is the notion of spiritual gain. And what I mean by this is that as we learn more about the world, we get a better understanding of our world and our place within it. Many people automatically think of religion when the term spiritual or spirituality is mentioned, but of course religion is only one way of expressing our spirituality or of meeting our spiritual needs. And there is certainly much to be gained in terms of our spirituality through learning, through the process of developing our knowledge, skills, values, confidence and so on, all the things that learning can contribute to. Then we can have a stronger sense of spirituality. For me, this is really important because what it emphasizes is that learning isn't simply a technical matter of, for example, how to be able to follow a particular procedure, how to use a particular program on a computer, for example. That sort of technical learning is important, but it needs to be understood in the wider context of a more holistic approach to learning, of seeing learning as being the development of ourselves as persons, rather than staying the same but with a few extra technical skills to our credit. So the idea of spiritual gain then is an important one. It's about recognizing that learning is much broader than technical skills. It's about how we relate to the world, in a sense. So it links in with our sense of identity, our sense of connectedness and so on. It helps us to make sense of our lives, to develop the sense of meaning, purpose and direction that are at the heart of spirituality. Okay, so it's now time for exercise 1.1. What I want you to do now is to turn to the printed copy of your module companion ebook and then complete exercise 1.1. Once you've done that, you can then return to the course main page to continue with lesson 1 when you're ready. Thank you.